People love power, don't they? So you have the perversions of men. You have the unbelief of men. There's some splits in Protestant denominations, for example, that are legitimate and that are right. Because you have certain bodies of believers who have moved away from the truth of the gospel. The Episcopalians are facing the possibility of a split over ordaining gay clergy. And there are some Presbyterian churches that no longer preach the gospel, if I might say. And so there were different groups that broke away, and now you have many, many Presbyterian churches that very clearly preach the gospel, but they had to separate. So some of that is all understandable. Then you have the preferences of people. Oh, we're into preferences. We're into worship styles. I go to this church because I like its worship style. I like its music, but I can't take that church because I don't like its music. And personal preferences today trumps doctrine. It trumps oftentimes the vision of a church because we want to go where it just suits us perfectly. You know, when I'm at pastors' conferences, I'm always asked, is Moody Church a traditional church or is it a contemporary church? And I smile and I say, we are a biblical church. Isn't that wonderful? And thank God we have both traditional and contemporary as we try to take the best from both. But where does this leave us? Now, I do have to distinguish between what is sometimes called the invisible church. I don't like that word very well, but it refers to the whole body of Jesus Christ, the church universal. Everybody who belongs to the universal church, the church invisible as it is called, is a born-again believer and will be in heaven. And that transcends denominations. Sometimes God's people are found in the most unlikely places. That's why we do not consign people to hell just because they don't belong to our denomination. Because we realize that even in some of these churches that no longer preach the gospel, there are saved people. And so what we recognize is that there is the invisible church. The invisible church includes the living and the dead. Paul says in chapter 3, verse 14 of Ephesians, he says this very clearly, the Father before whom the whole family in heaven and on earth is named. And someday we'll all be together in heaven, and that group of the elect is called in theology the invisible or universal church. Everyone who's a member of it is a born-again believer. But now let's talk about the local church. Let's talk about Moody Church. What can we say about it? First of all, it's a mixed multitude to some extent because we're not God. When you become a member of Moody Church, you are interviewed by someone who asks you your understanding of the gospel. It's not a huge theological test. We just want to know whether or not you've savingly believed on Jesus. About 15 or 20 years ago, I had lunch with a man over at Michael's, and I could go to the table that we were sitting at, who was a member, and he was saying things that were far out there. And he sits there and tells me that in no sense does he want Jesus to bear his sin, that he will bear his own sin for himself and the penalty of it. He said, I can't expect somebody else to bear my sin. I said, of course you can't, but that's where grace and love come in. Now, you have to understand, he's sitting on one side of the table and I'm sitting on the other, and I'm sure I took off my glasses. And I looked at him and I said, if you keep believing what you are believing, you are going to hell. And then he said something very shocking. He says, if I have to go to hell to bear my own punishment, to hell I will go. Chilling. Yes, my friend, that is chilling indeed. I hope no one listening to this broadcast today says that, because I'd have to say the same to you as I said to him. You will be lost forever if you think that Jesus didn't bear your punishment or receive from Jesus the gift of eternal life, which he died to give you. The fact is, we can't expect Jesus to have done this, but the good news is that he did. And that's the understanding of grace, and that's where mercy comes in, and that's where forgiveness comes in. But there's another lesson to be learned.
I ask myself, how did this man that I referred to a moment ago, how did he become a member of Moody Church? Somehow he slipped through our membership process, and we've tightened it since that time. But the fact is that you can be in church, you can have slipped through any membership process by saying the right words, and still not have believed in Jesus. At the end of the day, it's not the church that you belong to, it's not the things that you are involved in, it's not the money that you give, it's between you and Jesus and your heart. So I end today by asking you, have you savingly believed in Jesus, or did you self-deceive yourself because of wrong teaching or a wrong kind of faith? Today, call out to Jesus, trust Him alone.
Thank you, Dr. Lutzer. You've heard part 1 of Dr. Lutzer's message on When Beliefs Collide, the second in his new series on Christians in Conflict. There's no doubt the visible church comes in a lot of flavors. Tomorrow, why it's the invisible church that really matters. Running to Win comes to you from Chicago's Moody Church. Our 4-part series on Christians in Conflict can be yours on CD, cassette, or MP3. For full information, call toll-free at 1-800-215-5001. That's 1-800-215-5001. Ask about Christians in Conflict when you call. Visit our website at runningtowin.org. And don't forget, Running to Win is supported by listeners like you. This is Dave McAllister. So why do those beliefs collide? To find out, join us tomorrow for our next Running to Win.